Ciao and benvenuti to Untold Italy. I'm Josie.
And I'm Katy, and we're here to help you plan your trip to Italy.
Between us, we have many years of travel experience and we want to help you uncover your own, as yet untold stories and adventures in Italy.
Each episode you'll hear practical advice, tips and ideas to help you plan your own trips to the magical land of history, stunning landscapes and a whole lot of pasta.
We'll have interviews from experts and focus on local destinations and frequently asked questions about travel in Italy.
Thanks for listening and make sure to subscribe to our show.
Now let's get started on your regular dose of Bella Italia. Ciao everyone, welcome to Untold Italy. In this episode, we're going to help you understand accommodation options in Italy, from 5-star hotels to the charming B&Bs and more.
Oh, it's such a great topic, Josie, because after your flights, accommodation is usually the biggest expense of your trip, and you want to get it right.
Yeah, Katy, honestly, accommodation for me is the biggest, most important part of the trip, and I do a lot of investigation. Obviously, with my background being a hotelier and working for two of the biggest hotel chains in Australia, it's one of my things that I just do. So a couple of things that I do from I do a lot of investigation. That's number one. I get online, I look at hotels. But the first thing that I do is, how am I going to get to these different places? What type of accommodation do I want? So one of the big things that I do is I want to be close to a train station. Especially in Italy, like if we're going from Rome to Florence or we're going internal Italy on a train, especially if we went to Cinque Terre, when we got to Monterosso, I wanted to make sure that with four of us plus 4 suitcases plus carry-on plus everything, that I didn't want to be lugging it because I knew that terrain was really difficult. So I actually sourced the hotel close to the railway station. But then in doing that, what hotels? Because there's so many variety. You've got 5-star, you've got B&Bs, you've got Airbnb, and across so many different platforms. So it does get overwhelming. I've actually was reading a few people on your Untold Italy and Travel Italy Facebook page that is one of the most common questions around hotels. Is that correct? Do you find that?
Absolutely. Hotels and booking accommodation is something that comes up probably, I would say, 30 to 50% of the time in the group. And it's one of those things that we really want to help people with. So I think today, when we're having a chat about accommodation, is I guess we want to talk about what drives your decision to choose a particular type of accommodation and what accommodation is available in Italy, because I think there's some different types of accommodation out there that people may not be familiar with, and even the hotels have a slightly different way of describing their facilities and what's available. So we can't really expect the same level of or the same type of accommodation as you may do at home. So for us, when we're traveling, we like to look at the available accommodation options and the terrain about where we're going to stay. I think it's really important to choose location is probably the top thing that you're going to have to consider when you're booking the accommodation, and then it's the type of accommodation. So for us, I like to stay in the centre of towns. I don't know about you, but I think that even like one suburb out can make things a little bit more complicated in terms of transport. So you might pay a little bit more to stay in the central storico or the central areas of the cities, but I do think that it's worth that investment for a little bit more, because then you can walk everywhere.
Yeah, I agree. I think also it's more expensive though. Okay, so when you're looking at hotels centrally, it is really, you're going to be looking at a bit more pricey because of the convenience. Mm-hmm. If it is that you need to look at cost reduction in your itinerary, then, 2 or 3 suburbs out, as per your normal city, is where you're going to do some savings. And then the type of star ratings and the type of hotels. Being in Australia and having a brand new cities and brand new hotels being built is certainly not what we're going to be experiencing in Europe. The type of accommodation that sometimes we've shown up at, and I'll tell a story where we ended up driving into Calabria in a place called Pizzo, and we drove there, and obviously my family are used to quite good hotels, and I'd picked really great hotels around Italy, and we've driven into this apartment style hotel in southern part of Italy, and honestly, we've driven up, and my husband said to me as we've driven up, hasn't even seen the rooms, or he goes, "Oh no, we're not staying here." And I think you have to be, in saying that, I literally said, "Well, there's not many options."
Yeah.
So you have to understand cost wise options. I wanted somewhere, in that instance, I wanted somewhere close. I wanted somewhere where I could have my car. We needed a 2-bedroom apartment that could actually sleep, literally 4 adults, because the girls at that stage were 17 and 18. So we all needed our space. So again, you need to look at those sort of different things. Everyone looks for different things in accommodation.
Yeah. So trying to narrow down exactly what your requirements are is really important. Actually, I've got a blog post that I wrote on Untold Morsels that actually steps you through that. So I'll pop that in the show notes. But it's really important to know exactly what you're looking for. So definitely if you have a car, you're going to need a car space. And let me tell you, that's actually not as easy as it sounds, so especially in the central district. So sometimes you've got to work out, make some trade-offs about where you stay if you've got a car or if you want to stay near the station. Now, staying near the station is a really important topic, I think, because as you mentioned earlier, staying in the station near Monterosso is a really good idea. However, I don't think staying at the station near the station in most of the big cities is necessarily my choice of accommodation.
No, I think it's that investigation, right? So obviously in Rome, you wouldn't want to be staying near the station because I think it's just too much hustle and bustle. But how far do you want to walk, or how close is it for you? Or in Rome, you've got to commit to maybe getting a driver or a taxi or some sort of transfer, especially with a family like we had. The option was we get in a big taxi.
Yep.
So again, I think you're just in those little towns. Also, when we went to Como, a funnier story. You get to these places and you don't realize how many stairs Italy has. I mean, we talk about it. We get to Como, to the station there, and we get out and there's stairs everywhere. And you ask everyone where to go to find this hotel, which was right on Lake Como. Oh, yes, it would seem like quite a short walk because, again, if it's too short a walk, the taxis won't take you. But with 2 sets of luggage and backpack, and I don't travel light, it was a walk, and everyone kept saying, yeah, it's a really, really easy walk to this hotel. Let me tell you, it was not an easy walk with all the cobblestones and the stairs and the getting there. We eventually got there. So I think, I'm a little bit very pedantic. I print off how far it is. I look on Google Maps. I do the walking route on your, how you can either pick car, bus. I do the walking route.
Yep.
And so I think it's just as long as you're comfortable where you're going. But then when you look at the accommodation, it's different things for different people.
That's true. So you really got to understand, what you're looking for. So I just think staying near the station in some of these big cities, it's not, they're like Josie said, it's very busy, and also they're maybe not the most charming areas, I'll have to say. So you may be better off staying. It's very convenient to stay near the station, especially if you're doing day trips or you want to get there to and from for transit. But I usually choose some other areas. So maybe some favourite areas in Rome. I know you'd like to stay near the Spanish Steps, but I like to stay near the Pantheon because I like to have access to Campo di Fiori and the areas around that. And I also like to be able to quickly zip over to Trastevere. So I like Pantheon, but I guess in the next visit that we have, as we've said centrally many times, then I'll be trying a different neighbourhood, and I really want to try Testaccio because I did a fantastic food tour there recently and it was so much fun. I really love that neighbourhood, but everyone's different. How about in Florence, Josie? Where do you like to stay there?
Normally we stay really central, near just the walk to the Duomo, so not very far. And again, there is a cost to that. I used to work for Accor Hotels, so obviously we were able to get quite good prices at the Accor Hotels. So a lot of our time was driven by where are the hotels, and they're quite central. So that was one thing that I looked at. So central with Florence for me was then we could walk everywhere. What about you?
Yeah, I think it's easy to go central in Florence because it's so small, but last time I stayed there, I stayed in a gorgeous Airbnb apartment just around the corner from the Ponte Vecchio, and it was an amazing location, and it was a great apartment too, actually. But I think that you can also go a little further out in Florence and still have a great experience near Santa Croce district and Santo Spirito. There's some really lovely places around there, mainly some old palazzi, palaces that have been converted into boutique hotels. And in Venice, Venice is so small again, I think you can't really go wrong. If you have a lot of luggage, though, you need to be aware. I would stay near the station in that case because you don't really have a lot of options in terms of transport apart from the Vaporetto. And even then, you're still going to have to walk with your luggage for a while unless you get a private water taxi. And your hotel has a dock. So it's one of those things that you need to think about carefully when you go to Venice, I think, because you do hear stories of people, dragging their suitcases all over these the 400 bridges that Venice has, and it can be it's not fun, and it's easy to get lost too. So even if it looks like it's a 20-minute walk, it might take longer because you're sort of walking around in circles a little bit.
Yeah, we stayed over in the island, so we found that at an M gallery there at that stage, and you're right. We had no concept. The time that we got in, we had no concept of the transfers. So see, everyone, even when we travel, and we travel quite a lot, we still experience different things. And I was quite prepared, but wasn't really prepared. And we broke our suitcase wheel. So these are the things that go on, because you're right. Venice, I think you need to be central. I think near the station there, and there's so many options in Venice. Again, there's no right or wrong hotel or accommodation. You will be talking to different people, and I think Katy and I do that quite a lot. You'll go, oh, there was this great Airbnb. Someone will say, it really is up to you. Do the investigation, look at what you like, read the reviews. I think reviews are really something really important, and take them with a little bit of a grain of salt too, because when I was in hotels, what one person likes or one experience is not necessarily how all the experiences are.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. It's one of those things that in our group, we often have people asking, can you recommend a hotel in Rome, Venice, Florence? And it's really hard, because how can you do that? What I like maybe not be what you like, and we might have completely different budgets and completely different requirements. Anyway, so I think what we'll do now is have a chat through some of the different types of accommodation that's available in Italy, and just explain some of the things to look for. So to start off with, let's talk about hotels, because hotels in Italy is very different to the hotels that you'll find in the United States and in Europe and in Asia. So I did a lot of travel in Asia, and let me tell you, their hotels are absolutely phenomenal.
Oh, they're beautiful.
They're so nice, aren't they? And and in Australia we have different standards, and in the US there's different standards as well. But they try and even these out with star ratings, but it doesn't really translate into a European setting. And so what I wanted to do was really explain what the hotels are like in Italy, and how you can really assess what's going to work for you. So to start off with, many of them are in very old buildings and converted palaces or palazzo, and it's really, you cannot expect certain things that you may expect in a hotel in your country. So, for example, unless it's a higher class hotel, it may not have an elevator. So you need to specifically look if you need that. You do not want to be dragging your suitcases up 5 flights of stairs if you have mobility issues, for example. The other one is air conditioning.
Yeah, 100%. It gets very, very hot in June, July, August, 100%. It's very hot. And if you really don't cope without air conditioning, you need to check that.
Yeah, and it's traditional hotels. You cannot expect that. So I think, when we're traveling around in Australia or in the United States, really you would just have that as a given. But in Europe, it's not a given.
Yeah.
You can't expect to have air conditioning. And also the room sizes. They're really small, much smaller than what you would get elsewhere in the world.
And I think the other thing because the rooms are small, again, because these are historic, some of them are historical buildings, they're just buildings that they're converted into a hotel. The other thing that you've got to be really conscious of is the bed size. We are all very lucky to have king-size beds. That is something you'll need to check the configuration, because they're usually queen or double.
Yep.
To be honest, more doubles.
Yep.
And that can also prove problematic if you you are used to king size and you have some mobility issues as well.
Yeah, and I think even like when we moved to the UK, we found out that a queen in Australia does not equal a queen in the UK. So it's like there's all these translation issues that it translates over there. So a double is really a small double bed. It really is small. It's like a 1.5 of what you would expect. And so if you're wanting to have a little bit of extra space in terms of your bed and the room, you're really going to have to look at 4-star hotels and above, I think, because 3-star hotels are really what you would probably be considered basic. But they can be so charming, though, and that's the thing. You know, there's no... I wouldn't discount those hotels, but you need to understand what you're getting into and really read the reviews and the description of the hotels very carefully.
Yeah, I think if you're really looking for the same, you look at your name chains, right? Yep. The name chains have certain bedding configuration depending, but also they're more luxurious and they're bigger and they've got everything, right? So I think, but then with that comes the big price tag, because you're looking at if you were looking at a 5 or 4-star hotel centrally in Florence or Rome, you may get, I don't know whether you're going to always get a king size bed. Again, make sure when you book that you're checking the booking and confirming the room type and also your bedding configuration, because that's really important. So, if you're looking for that, look at your 5-star, 4-star, your named, brands that you know around the US, the global brands that would have that, because usually they have a brand standard. Hotels usually have brand standards of those big, they buy the same sort of size beds, depending again. Whereas if you're going to a local European branded hotel, they've got different size configurations and beds.
That's true. And I think, well, for me, I love boutique hotels. So I like the smaller, more intimate hotels. And again, you can find some amazing places that have that maybe a little bit more luxurious feel, but you also get an element of charm, because I've stayed in some beautiful places with frescoes on the ceilings and shutters and just very well done, but they may not have the exact facilities that you would expect at a 5-star hotel in other parts of the world.
And I think something else that you really need to be very mindful of is they do a lot of shower over baths. So if you have mobility issues or you get a bit worried, I sometimes get worried that I'm going to slip in the bath because I'm so not used to it. It's not because of mobility for me. It's just something we're not used to in Australia. We're used to walking into our showers. So again, be very careful. If also, I was telling Katy, one of the things that we found when I worked in a hotel, that we'd get many emails from international travelers just asking for different things like that. How is the bed configuration? Can you confirm this? I've booked this. So feel free that when you are booking, that you can send an email to the hotel, usually to the reservations team or whatever you can find online, and they will come back to you with that information.
Yeah, okay, that's a great tip. So with hotels, I think we use hotels. I use hotels when we're staying somewhere maybe 1 to 2 nights, because I like to have someone available to help answer questions and to really, be there available and has a 24/7 front desk that you can, if you're arriving late or leaving early, you've got that capability. Now, however, now we travel with our kids, that hotels may not be the best option. Our kids are at this age, they're in primary school or elementary school if you're in the United States, and they are small, and I don't want them to be in a separate room for safety reasons. But we also would like some space. Now, when we are looking at accommodation initially, sometimes we choose apartments or Airbnbs because it makes more sense for us. We like to have a separate lounge area and separate beds for us all, because we can like to have a good night's sleep, and you're really going to get probably a lot more value for your money if you choose an apartment or Airbnb in this case, because when you're choosing the hotel rooms, you may not get that unless you're choosing a suite, which there aren't that many available actually. And when you do find them, they're quite expensive. You won't get that space and potentially the bed situation. You can get quadruple rooms in a hotel. However, they usually have like a sofa bed And I don't like, well, especially if we're on a long trip, I don't really like the kids to stay on a sofa bed all the time. So,
yeah, I agree. I think for me, because I really love hotels, I do a bit of a mixture of both. I've got the girls who are now 22 and 23, so we can have separate rooms. So it really depends. I think you're right. 1 or 2 nights, sometimes I do a hotel. If I'm in a country or in a city that I want to have that more bespoke and want to go to concierge or feel that I need that extra help. I mean, when I first started traveling to Italy, I liked that because you can ask, can you get a transfer? Because I've been in hotels so long, I like that help around. But then also when you're on long trips, which we were on for about 6 weeks around Italy, I wanted to have the washing area as well. So I had, washing for me was really important. The 4 of us just needed to get our T-shirts washed every day. And it gets to a point after 3 or 4 weeks that you don't want to have a whole suitcase worth of dirty clothes. So for me, also looking for apartments or Airbnbs that had washing facilities central. So again, it really depends. I usually mix it up for both. I if I'm in an area that I want to have a hotel because I want to have that luxury sort of area, or it's it was our wedding anniversary and I wanted to be in a beautiful hotel in Verona, we did that. But then when we went to Rome, we looked at an Airbnb or an apartment style, and also having, traveling with the 4 kids, 2 kids and my husband, 3rd kid, that, you wanted to have some washing facilities. So again, look at the time that you're around, because also if you're doing a washing, you need to be in that city for 3 or 4 or, days to get it dried as well.
That's so true, because it's quite humid over there, and you won't find a dryer in these places. So it's air drying only. So yeah, you're right. And we need a washing facilities as well. So that's another important reason to choose Airbnbs. So there's renting out apartments has been going on in Italy way before Airbnb came along. And I can tell you a funny story of when I first went to Florence and I arrived on the train, and this was in the 90s. And it's so funny then because we didn't have the internet. So how did you find accommodation? And I was backpacking. And basically what happened was you'd arrive at the station and then there'll be all these people lined up with like a folder showing a picture of their room, and you choose their accommodation. I mean, you would never do that these days. It would be considered so dangerous. But, you just talk to a few guys and would say, oh, come to my apartment and it'll cost you this much. Off you went and you stayed in the apartment. But now, obviously, these days you can choose online. There's many different options to choose from. I use, actually, in our next trip that I'm planning right now, I've pretty much exclusively booked accommodation, a mixture of hotels and apartments on Booking.com.
Oh, yeah, I've done that too.
Yeah, I think Airbnb is good. However, they don't have maybe as flexible cancellation policies, and they may not also have as big a range. So I like to be able to compare. You've got on Booking.com, you've got hotels, apartments, B&Bs, and lots of different options to choose from. So yeah, that's one thing to think of if you're not familiar with that platform. The other one that I find has got some great listings for apartments in Italy, and especially on the Amalfi Coast for some reason, is VRBO.
Yes, I've seen them. They've got some great listings.
In fact, it's much better than Airbnb than on in the Amalfi Coast for some reason. So it's just one thing to consider as well. So I think, yeah, the apartments and Airbnb is a long-established form of accommodation across Italy, and you will find there's, the different options where you can exclusively book the apartment, which is what we do, or you can, rent out a room if you're on a budget, and it's a very common way of doing things. One thing that they do ask for, though, which is something we should mention, is there's a couple of things you need to know. One is the city tax that you will be paying. So that you will usually pay your accommodation. If you're paying it up front, you might say you're paying €100, just for an example. You pay, and then there'll be a city tax on top of that. And each city charges a separate tax depending on the class of accommodation, the number of people staying. So it's a per person charge.
And also, Katie, I think a couple of really important tips. they will ask for your passports, or everyone's passports. So don't be alarmed that you think they're going to steal your identity. It's part of the government law that they need to ask for everyone's passport that is staying. Also, in a hotel, I've always experienced this, and I know that we used to get a lot of questions from travellers, is that we're asked to put down a credit card to hold a bond. Right. And it's usually, depending on the hotel, it's a per night. What that is that unfortunately or fortunately, it's just a security for the hotel that if you use their minibar or you go to the restaurant and you happen to not pay for your bill, they've taken a bond. So it is, what they do is they hold that amount of money. So it could be $100 or 100 euros. It really depends. 50 euros it could be per night for your stay, and they couldn't just hold it on your credit card. So also be wary of that, because that holds on your credit card. So I always travel with 2 credit cards, one that does the hold, because that can take a couple of weeks for that to get I know it sounds really strange, but the bank sometimes doesn't release it.
Yep.
And I just want to be really clear here. It is not the hotel that holds it. So once you check out, they will take the holding off and charge your card with what you have done, but they release it. It's up to the bank, and sometimes your bank, being overseas, can take a week or up to 2 weeks to release that. So if you are wanting that funds on your credit card, it holds as part of your funds. So just be aware that sometimes that's just a little tip that I know that I've had many emails when I was in the hotel. Why isn't my funds been released? We release them, but it can be the bank. So be wary of that as well. That is just something, it's a standard that they do ask.
Yeah, that's a great tip. You sometimes forget about those things, and then suddenly you're looking at your banking and you're going, oh, I thought I had a bit more available on my card than that. So that's a great tip, Josie. The other thing that I think the next thing to talk about is really some accommodation types that you may not expect, that you may not have experienced in other parts of the world. And this is really, I find it really amazing, and we kind of stumbled across this by accident one time, and now we've never looked back. There's a concept in Italy called Agriturismo, which are basically a farm stay, which sounds fairly rustic, and it can be, because what it is that the government has allowed farmers to make additional income by renting out their rooms. But the farmers really don't offer just that. They actually offer an amazing service. So you could get a room, but also a meal that's cooked from the produce from the farm. Amazing. It's so good. And you can they also usually have some great facilities. So we stayed in an agriturismo in Sicily, which was just divine. It was set in these lemon groves. It had a beautiful swimming pool.
Oh, beautiful.
It was an old converted manor house, I guess, and it also had a wine cellar and a restaurant. So it was kind of like a mini resort, I would have to say, and it was not rustic at all. It was quite luxurious, actually. So it's one of those accommodation options that I think Europeans are very familiar with, but if you're coming from outside of Europe, you may not know about them. But I really seek this type of accommodation out now because it's really quite special. It's cozy, it's friendly, and if you're looking for some of those little extras like a swimming pool, which is a great idea, especially in summer, you may not get them in a hotel, to be honest, because the hotels in the centre they're limited for space. So I really recommend staying in an agriturismo. They're also called in Puglia, it's slightly different. They're called masserie, and they are beautiful old maybe country manors that have been and estates that have been converted into accommodation, and there you'll definitely usually get a pool. Did you stay in one?
No, we stayed because we wanted to stay right in the heart of Lecce and Armao. So we stayed sort of, but I have been on Instagram and seen some amazing stays, and when I go back to Puglia, definitely. I think the other really great thing, many years ago I worked for a company that would do stays in monasteries. They had a connection with the Catholic Church, and some of the old nunneries had been transformed into accommodation. So you were able to say monasteries and those sort of accommodations, which were again really amazing. So when we talk about accommodation, there's so many variety, and it really is what you feel like and how confident you are. And maybe not on your first trip, you might want to do hotels, but definitely incorporate some of these places when you go.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you stay in a Truly house in Puglia?
Yes. Oh, well, that was interesting. So finding a Truly house in Puglia. So for those of you who don't know, in a little place called, my daughter say I say it wrong. So for those Puglianesi, if I say it wrong, I apologize. Arrabobello. They're little, they're like huts made of clay and thatched roofs, and they're really amazing. It's an amazing experience. It was very, how am I going to say this? Very primitive, like rustic? Don't expect to have the luxury. It was definitely it wasn't a 5-star hotel, but you know what, in experiencing it, we drove in, it was easy to drive in, and also something I did want to bring up, because when I first started doing Airbnbs especially Airbnbs where you communicating with the actual owners and the people, and when do you get there, where do you get the key. So I can be believe it or not, a panic traveler, because I like to have everything knowing where it is. So how do you communicate, and how are they going to know when you're going to get there, and what do you know? So it was really interesting. When you first start, you'll get used to it. Like now I am used to it. So the day we arrived in Arrabobello, I text them, and that's why you need your Wi-Fi, so 100%. So you let them know where you are. You can send them locations if you get lost on your location on your phone. So I'm pretty good now if I get lost, but not very rarely. But again, we're experienced travelers, but we still have some bloopers along the way. So it was amazing. It was an amazing stay. And in Lecce, and we'll talk about that when we get to Puglia, which I love Puglia. We stayed in the old city. Again, you can't park in that area. So, but yeah, there's different types of accommodation, and it's amazing.
Well, I think you can now find these luxury, truly places and I've had my eye on a few of those, but I think that, yeah, you need an amazing experience is to stay in an agriturismo. And how you find them is I'll put the links in the show notes, but there's agriturismo.it. Unfortunately, that's a really it's an awful booking engine. So if you find one that you like, look it up and then look for it on booking.com, because they usually list on there and it's easy to book. I use booking.com a lot actually, because I've got Genius level.
Yeah. So
and I get discounts, and I find it, it helps me plan it out. And I might book a few places and then change, basically depending on how I'm, if I've changed my mind. So I'll have a few. But I think if you're booking the smaller places, it's good not to cancel too late, because you can really impact their business then. Yeah,
so that's something really important that Katy just touched on as well, cancellation fees, right? So hotels, let me just explain this. So you get cheaper if you prepay.
Yep.
Well in advance, right? Because what the hotel, you're securing that from a hotel, so you're making sure that the hotel knows that Katy's going to be arriving on this day. She's prepaid, and she's prepaid for breakfast and everything. Now, there's also going to be a different fee if you don't want to prepay, because you want to have the flexibility of the cancellation. And if you're not 100% sure because your flights are changing or you haven't committed, I would strongly suggest to book a non-cancel. Book one that is you're able to cancel. Also on that, the reason that you can do that is if you're booking June, July and August and you haven't finalised all your itineraries, or you've got a couple of hotels that you're looking at, don't leave it too late. Okay, so like everything, you might know that there is something happening in that city that at the moment is available, but all of a sudden it could be filled up and the rates can go. So just also another note on hotels, how does it work with their rates? Well, how can they charge different rates? So when you book well in advance, they've got a whole hotel that they've got available. And as you get closer, they need to make as much money in what they call yielding of their revenue, right? Yeah. So if they have only 10 or 20 rooms available, they want to maximize that. So therefore, the higher the occupancy, the higher the price of that room, because they're looking at people really wanting to go, or they're wanting a more, because it's peak time, they might want expensive, they want more money for their room.
Yeah, and I think timing is an excellent point, Josie, because Unfortunately, or fortunately, Italy is so popular that you cannot leave your accommodation bookings to the last minute unless you're really not so fussy. I really am seeing even in the what's considered to be the low season, some of the better hotels, you're just not able to get rooms,
No.
even 2 months out. So I'm going on a trip in a couple of months, and we've missed out on places. I've left it too late. So if you're going in summer and if you've got some accommodation in mind and you've had your eye on it, you need to book as soon as you can. And some people are booking their accommodation up to 12 months in advance as soon as they become available to book. And I would recommend that wholeheartedly because it's very competitive. So many people want to go to Italy because it's so wonderful, and you are competing with a lot of people for that accommodation.
Yeah, also I think if it's a hotel, Katie, if you're looking at a Booking.com, the hotels allow certain allocations to Booking.com and across the online network, that if there is a specific hotel that you're like, I stayed there for our wedding anniversary or when we got married and I really want to go back, email them. It could be a little bit more expensive. It could be cheaper. You never know. So again, if you can't find it on the online system, also email the hotel because you'll find that they may have rooms available. They're just not putting them on the online, and there could be or you go to the hotel chain website and you can also check there. So there's different options.
Yeah, and sometimes hotels obviously are getting a bit wiser to how much value they can add to their direct customers. So you can often get additions added in and potentially a better room if you book direct online. So there's swings and roundabouts and different benefits to either booking through one of the booking engines or or booking direct. So I do both depending on the situation, and that really has worked well for us. Now, I just wanted to say there's one type of accommodation we haven't talked about yet, but
I was just about to get to that one.
But this is like my favourite, and I've actually got a significant birthday coming up in 5 years that I am actually going to completely use this for, is you can actually, it's my dream actually to hire a villa for a couple of weeks and just have friends and family come and stay. So
I'm ready to come, Katie.
Yeah, okay. Let's go. But so you can, all over Italy there are some amazing villas and properties, even in castles actually, where you can rent out the entire property, and they come with swimming pools, and like there's various different options and for various different budgets. But yeah, I would love to be able to do that and just invite all my friends and family. That is my dream. I would love to do that maybe in Sicily or Puglia, and just have everyone just chill out and relax and around in a beautiful scenery in Italy. I think that's my dream.
There's also one that probably you and I don't use, but my daughters and their friends do. So for those of you who've got young kids or young adults that go on budget to Europe, they use hostels.
Yep.
So again, some of these hostels that the kid or the young adults, our girls are using, can also be something that you can look at. They're quite centrally located. My understanding from listening to the girls where they've travelled through Europe, that they find them they're quite easy to get to. There's a group of them they can have, and quite budget as well. So if there are those of you that have, looking at a different cheaper option, that is also one.
Well, let me tell you, hostels are not what they used to be.
No, they're really upgraded them. Yeah, and that's what I heard from. I mean, I remember when the girls said that they were going to stay in a hostel, I go, you couldn't possibly. And then they've gone, no, Mum, they're really great. And they've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and there's some amazing hostels now that offer some, activities where you can stay and have a private room even, and have activities like walking tours that they run, and they're really fantastic these days. So I recommend hostels and B&Bs actually. We haven't talked about them. No. But they're another option that I guess it's kind of like a small hotel. They may have a couple of rooms, and they usually provide a nice breakfast, and you'll meet the owners, and it'll be quite a lovely experience too.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot of options. So a couple of key takeaways for all of you when looking at accommodation. Read your reviews. Look at your location.
Yep.
Look at the bed configurations and the room configurations. So don't expect it to be anything like home. Make sure that if you have any special requests, if you have issues with mobility, make sure that you email or look at those configurations. Make sure that the hotel is in an area that you'd like like it to be. And really just read the information again. I'm really big on this reading of information and taking it. If the person that's written it, is it relevant to you? Is it something that you would do? The porter, if there's a comment on it that the porter wasn't very nice, I mean, honestly, everyone has a bad day. So read into those remarks and those feedbacks, and look at what you really look at it. See if you want hotels, if you want Airbnb, look at the search engines. So there's a whole range of things. So it is a very big topic when it comes to accommodation.
Yeah.
But find what's relevant for you and what you're comfortable with.
Yeah, and I think reading the reviews and knowing your requirements is so important, because that's going to set you up for finding the accommodation that's right for you. I actually only ever go, if I'm looking on Booking.com as an example, I only go with the rating 9 or above, actually. Yep. I'm pretty fussy about that. And they have to have at least 20 to 30 reviews. So, and you've got to read the reviews, because what's golden to someone is bronze to someone else, So it's very important to read the reviews and read into it as well.
Do you know what I do, Katy? I actually look at where the review people come from, which country, because I find that different countries' viewpoint from that hotel can be. So I look at usually the UK, Australia and US to see what their reviews, where I find that sometimes a review out of a European country can be a little bit different to how we see things.
Yep.
So again, look at it from a cultural background as well, because what we look for in a hotel is very different from our European counterparts and what they're expecting from a hotel.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So I can't stress more to read the reviews and make sure that you know what you're looking for. Okay, so if you have any more questions about booking accommodation in Italy, we'd like you to head on over to our free Italy travel planning Facebook group. And this is the place where you can get tips and recommendations from travellers and people that are in Italy at the moment or have been many, many times, and they can help you out. If you are looking for accommodation recommendations on the group, I would like to ask that you are specific about your requirements so that everyone can help you the best they can. So you can find all our accommodation guides and our booking checklist article in the show notes at untolditaly.com/podcast. I do create a lot of accommodation guides, and there's ones for all the major areas in Italy. So Venice, Florence, Rome, Amalfi Coast, Cinque Terre. We have accommodation guides for that, so you can check them out. And speaking of the Cinque Terre.
Wow, Katy, I'm so excited about our next episode. So we're going to be talking to a special guest from Cinque Terre, which is one of my favourite places.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I'm very excited to introduce this guest to you next time. And the area is stunning and it's on so many bucket lists. So it's going to be really fascinating to hear what it's like to live there, because this person actually lives there, and get the inside scoop on what to do and all the other tips. So thank you for listening. Grazie. And we'll be back next time.
We certainly will. Enjoy. Thank you.
Thanks.